All right, welcome back to the podcast, you guys. Episode number 5.
Cinco.
And we have the full crew here today. Performance Bicycles in the house.
Can we get an applause for that? The full crew. What is this?
Yeah, full crew with a new setup too.
Yeah.
Yeah, sounding professional now.
I was gonna say you could probably only notice if you're watching the video version of this, but our audio quality has skyrocketed too. So hopefully you notice.
Yeah.
On all your other platforms.
I'm noticing it. I'm enjoying it. These mics just make you feel kind of cool.
Yeah.
Because we're professional.
Yeah, we are
Professional podcasters now. So as we roll into this, once again, my name is Jeffrey, and with us we also have...
I'm Ryan.
I'm Jack.
And I'm Nick.
And we're the full Performance Bicycle crew. And today we're going to go ahead and talk about chain waxing. Is drip lube dead? Is chain wax the next big thing? It's been around for a while already, and it is kind of taking, the industry by storm. As far as I'm concerned, it's the future.
I couldn't agree more. Chain waxing. You're saying it's kind of new, but kind of not. Chain waxing, people using straight paraffin wax on their chains, has been around for a long time. I think it's really become more popularized recently because we have big name brands actually manufacturing and selling dedicated kits for it, right?
Yeah, the wax is kind of becoming mainstream. I mean, I usually run the Silca. There are multiple brands that do it. I mean, Absolute Black even has one.
Right.
Not
Ceramic
not a company
Speed.
I would expect.
Yeah. There's a bunch of brands, a bunch of smaller brands making it as well. We've seen a bunch of more of the kind of consumer direct brands, but kind of the stuff maybe your local bike shop would have, or you can buy from our website. That's going to be Silca. It's going to be, Ceramic Speed kind of product.
And then you can even get those direct to consumer ones that are waxed on a new chain.
Yeah.
And you're spending crazy amounts of money.
You're buying like the nicest chain, whatever your chain manufacturer is, a Dura Ace chain or a SRAM Red Axis chain.
It's an upcharge of like $75.
Just
you're
have it waxed.
Think of now like you're buying a transmission chain. You're spending $125 on your chain and then another $75 to get it waxed. You're spending $200 just to get a chain that you're going to have to wax in a couple hundred miles again anyways.
So why are people buying pre-waxed chains, Jeff?
I think it comes down to the quality of the waxing, and then there's so many benefits when it comes to chain wax. A lot of people are not going to be buying those pre-waxed chains for just general training.
Right.
If you have a big A race or something super important coming up, it can be worth it strictly for the efficiency benefits. I'm a huge fan of the cleanliness benefits. Chain wax is pretty insane whenever you actually get out there riding on it. The benefits are almost instantly noticeable.
But I think, and what I was getting at, it's the other side of the reason people are buying the pre-waxed chains is because waxing a chain is a little bit involved and can be kind of intimidating. So if you have somebody who's got it done for you, that makes it a little easier. But I think that's part of what we're here to talk about is maybe debunking some of the waxing myths. And
yeah, I think I'm the only one here who wasn't fully converted to the chain waxing yet, so I have a little bit of that different perspective or that newbie perspective into it. So
I guess that's a good point.
We're
We're all
ask
on
you guys some good questions.
100% wax chains, every one of us on all of our bikes.
Every single bike.
Have you gone to the commuter bike yet?
Not the single
Okay.
speed, no.
I did. My single speed's got a wax chain.
Really?
Did you?
Yeah.
Oh, wow.
Nice.
Yeah, at the last time I did it, I was like, I'm waxing a couple for my road bike, and I'm like, I'll take the single speed chain off and wax that as well. It's great.
That's how you know you're fully
It's
committed.
awesome.
So when we say we're all in on this for Nick, Jeff, and myself, we're talking that we're even waxing the chains on our trail bikes, our full suspension mountain bikes. Like we are waxing all the chains. And that might be a little shocking to a lot of you because I think there's some myths that the wax doesn't last very long. It doesn't work in dirty conditions. It doesn't work in wet conditions. And to a degree, some of that stuff can be true. But also, the waxing, the main benefit I think that people talk about and the brands really talk about is the efficiency, the watt savings. That's the really big measurable stuff. So when I'm going on a real casual trail ride on my mountain bike or Nick's commuting into the office on his single speed, why would you wax a chain?
It's the cleanliness.
Cleanliness.
Like, I can grab my chain. Like if it pops off, if you happen to have a drop chain and you need to go and actually put it back on. You can grab it with your hand, and your hand's going to be clean afterwards. And that is just amazing.
So maybe we should just start right now. Like, what
Yeah.
are the benefits of waxing your chain?
Should we start with what like kind of the manufacturers say and what
Yeah.
you see?
Yeah,
Cool.
like what they're marketing towards you to try and get you on wax chain.
Most of the stuff I tend to see from these manufacturers is claimed wattage savings of a couple few watts. I feel like I've seen maybe up to 4 or 5.
It's usually around 5 is what you see.
Yeah.
And I
Yeah.
think that when you buy them like pre-waxed from certain distributors or whoever has them, I think it goes well with the A-race list because you have your training chain basically. It's almost
Right.
like training and racing wheels of past. Of
Yes,
like, You're
yes.
going to get these fancy ones. You're going to use it one time for the race.
Yep.
It's going to cost you more, but you're guaranteed to save 5 watts. or
It's the
whatever it
equivalent
is.
of the new marathon running shoes, right?
Exactly,
Where
yeah.
they're intended for one-time, two-time use. You spend a lot of money on them, but it's A-race stuff. Yeah. So that's the biggest one that all these brands seem to be talking about. This 3 plus 5 watt savings. It's all an efficiency thing. What else are the
I
brands
think
talking about?
second to that is usually, at least with the Silka one, is the longevity of your drivetrain components.
Yes, yes.
They claim that because there's reduced friction, there's going to be reduced friction and wear on your components. So in the long run, you're going to save money because your components will last longer, which is also a push to maybe you do buy that more expensive cassette, the more expensive chain ring, because it will last longer.
Yeah, I know I myself have been a big proponent of when I was training really hard and putting in a lot of training miles, buy the cheapest chain you can get. Because shifting quality doesn't vary a lot between chain tiers. You know, like if you had a Dura Ace chain, Ultegra chain, 105 chain on your drivetrain, you probably won't notice a difference in shifting. And for me, chains are, you treat them as disposable. If you can get a couple thousand miles out of your chain, depending on where you live and the conditions you ride in, that was great. And then you're throwing that chain away. Now, with waxing, if you can triple or quadruple the mileage you can get, I'm genuinely thinking, well, maybe I would consider that higher end chain for the weight savings because I'm getting so much life out of this chain as it is. Or still run that same level of chain and you're just saving more money.
That's what I went with is I went with the cheaper chain still, but that's because I've got like 3 in rotation for my road bike, got a couple in rotation for my mountain bike. Because when you're doing this whole chain waxing process, it's better to just bulk wax them at once. So you always have a few around ready to go.
Yeah.
And that's kind of brings up a different point of best practices when you are chain waxing, is there are a few things that you can do to speed up the process, to make it more viable whenever it actually comes time to do it.
Absolutely.
And as Nick touched on right there, it's having multiple chains. Because
real quick though,
Yeah.
let's start with what does it actually take to wax a chain?
Yeah.
Like before we get into like the
Or should we stay on
the-
benefits for a second too? Because we talked
Yeah,
about
yeah.
manufacturer
Yeah, we can
benefits.
round
Maybe
that out.
let's talk about the benefits and the reasons that we have all switched to waxing chains, including down to town bikes. What are the main benefits for you, Jeff?
As far as, like the marginal gains the longevity of it, you can get 500 miles out of a chain. Roughly, which
Like without having to
of the
lubricate
wax.
it.
per wax.
Yeah.
Yeah, I see what you're saying. Yeah.
So it's like that. If you're going to be lubing your chain, you got to do it pretty much every ride. So it is
if you're
kind of
saying
a
if you're
set it
using
and
like a
forget it.
drip wax,
Yeah.
instead of a hot wax, you're going to have to lube your chain pretty much every training ride if you're riding a couple hours.
Exactly. You're just going to get less maintenance, but more involved maintenance whenever it comes to doing it.
Now, someone's going to say, well, I don't have to wax or lube my chain every time. If you're running a traditional wax, like a petroleum-based wax, a wet lube or something like that, those last a really, really long time as far as how frequently you need to drip lube on it. But anyone who's ever done that before knows that their chain is probably completely black, and you don't want to touch your bike with a 10-foot pole because you look at it wrong, you're going to be covered in grease. Those rookie marks, right? You see people that have the chain ring marks all over them and stuff and smear. You throw that bike in your car, you lost your upholstery.
It's that infamous Cat 5 tattoo. Like you see
Cat
it on
5, yes.
your calf or whatever.
Or makes me think it's
Yeah.
leaned up against the wall in your house and your cat rubs against it and your nice little orange, tabby or whatever, they're now black.
Yep.
So, yeah, to your point, you're going to get a lot of life out of the chain without a lot of required maintenance in dry conditions.
Yeah, it lasts pretty long. I mean, we did a tour earlier this year of close to 450 miles or so,
I think so.
down from San Diego up to Monterey. I had one chain the entire time, never had to touch it.
Just with the melt wax.
Yeah, with that hot melt wax.
Yep. And that's been my experience as well, is that the idea that there's a lot of maintenance with this, it's a lot to do, but it's infrequent. So it's more of a, for me, it's more of a mentality change. You know, like instead of like, oh, my chain's a little squeaky, right before this ride, I got to lube it up. You don't really have that luxury. But if you have a plan and a system in place, you're not needing to do that kind of thing hardly ever. And you get this wonderful bonus of a really, really clean drivetrain. And for me too, that clean drivetrain translates to a much cleaner bike. I've had to not use nearly as much degreaser when cleaning my bikes these days because there's no grease. You're getting some road grime, you're getting some dirt, some dust. You know, if I have to open up a headset, a bottom bracket, set of pedals, a place where there is grease, of course. But as long as those things are staying intact on the bike and you're just trying to clean the thing up, you can use a hose. It's great.
Yeah, it makes it very simple. And I think we can go ahead and actually get into kind of the process.
Yeah, we should do
and take a dive into that.
Yeah, so one of the questions I had with that would be, like, we'll get into like what all you need, and then I kind of had a question of like, what are like the bare bones of what you actually need to get into it? Maybe try it for the first time, then versus what is like an ideal setup of when you're like you're full on, you're waxing all your chains. I feel like there is a pretty big difference there of what you need to have to do it versus what is like a luxury of doing
Absolutely. And maybe to give us some authority too, we're all saying that we wax our chains. How long have you been doing it for, Nick? Like how long have you been waxing chains?
Probably for about the last year or so.
Last year, Jeff?
Right around there.
I think I started the beginning of this last season, so 9 months.
9 months. And I feel like I'm pushing 18 months or so. So we didn't start this last month. You know, we have a little bit of time under our belts doing this to have gone through what we think makes sense for a process, how to make it simplest, you know, why we've transitioned all our bikes to this. But yeah, to that point, what is best practices?
So,
or how does it work? How do
exactly.
you do it?
Mm-hmm.
So how it works is you take this paraffin like hard wax, and at some point you have to melt it down.
Right.
There are a few systems to do that. You can use a crock pot, you can use a pressure cooker. Silica even comes in a bag that you can simply put in boiling water, which I did the first time. Turned out to be a complete mess doing it that way, only because I wasn't paying close enough attention and the bag kind of tipped over and wax went all over my counter.
In your kitchen.
But that was,
Not in the garage.
user error. Yeah, that was in the kitchen. So that was a mess to clean up. But basically you melt the wax, you put the chain in the wax after completely cleaning it.
Right.
You need to have a spotless chain. Even when you get a brand new chain, you're going to want to degrease it because it comes with factory grease, and you want it to absolutely nothing to be on it so that the wax can adhere to it and just last longer.
You want your chain to be bare metal and nothing else.
So is just like your regular degreaser good enough, or do you need anything beyond that?
What they recommend is actually using almost like a mineral spirit.
Yeah.
That's really going to clean it out of the chain. And you want to soak and agitate it in this mineral spirit for 10 to 15 minutes, they recommend, and even possibly do a couple cycles of that. And really, I've done it where you don't actually clean the chain and you just drop it in the wax. It works. It's just for a longer life of the wax, you're going to want to have your chain be cleaner.
To maximize the benefit.
Yes.
Like Silco will tell you, don't do it with a dirty chain or don't do it with a brand new chain that hasn't been cleaned. And technically you can. You're going to contaminate your wax, which is expensive. It's, you know, you have to buy this wax and it's not the cheapest thing in the world. And to Jeff's point, now you don't have that wax material clinging to the metal as much. It's got degreaser in there, it's got grease in there, which is just like greasing a pan in the kitchen, right? You don't want stuff to stick. You're making it not stick as well, so it doesn't hold as well. So best practice is definitely to thoroughly clean that chain. And household degrease or whatever you use for your bike, you know, some sort of muck off or park product, it's not going to do a good enough job. really want to get after it with the mineral spirits. And then I think they recommend after that too, to make sure you don't leave any mineral spirit on the chain as a contaminant, to use rubbing alcohol or an alcohol to clean the chain again, because that'll flash off and not leave anything behind.
Yeah, and then typically try and blow it out with an air compressor or something afterwards, just to make sure that the chain is dry.
Yeah, or if you've got time, let it hang dry until it's done.
Yeah. And after that, you go ahead and just drop it down into your melted wax. Usually you'll let it sit there. I think they recommend like 10 to 15 minutes of actually sitting in the wax so that it can fully penetrate. And then you're going to pull it out, hang it, and let it dry. It's pretty straightforward from there, but it can be messy too.
A bit. The actual setup, you've taken wax, and if you've ever played with a candle before or something, once that wax starts to melt, you can you get like the candle wax on your finger, you stick your finger on, all of a sudden it dries around your finger. It dries really quickly. So if you drip wax anywhere, you're getting dried spots of wax all over the place, and they're not coming up with cleaner. You got to scrape them off of whatever you got them. So you get them on textiles, on fabric, it's not coming out in the wash. You got to be a little bit careful and attentive.
I mean, you look at the workbench here and there's wax dots everywhere.
So best not to do it in the kitchen.
Wouldn't recommend kitchen. Now, I will say the thing that there's a lot of barriers to entry for me when I first considered doing this is like, I got to wax my chain. To just lubricate my chain, I'm having to invest in a crock pot or a pressure cooker and all this stuff, and I don't even know if I like it and if I want to do it. Silka reduced the barrier to entry for me because they offered the wax in a bag. That bag is like a sous vide bag that you'd use for certain cooking applications. So like Jeff said, you get to do it on the stovetop. You have a pot, you fill it with boiling water, you very carefully put that bag in and find some way to hold it up so it doesn't fall over and spill wax all over your kitchen. But once you've got that going, then I probably haul the bag outside. I wouldn't keep doing the whole process in the kitchen.
Well, when I made the mess, it was because the bag was standing up in the pot while the water was boiling. So it wasn't standing very well. I probably should have used a deeper pot. That was probably the problem. But then it just at some point tipped over and just spilled half of it out.
Well, and I ran into that too. And what I started doing was I would take a pair of like tongs, like kitchen tongs, and pinch them around it and close the tongs and rest them on the edge of the pot so that it was like less likely to fall over. And that's what I did for months when I was waxing the chains initially. It was boiling a pot of water, melting the wax, but
$5 at the grocery or $5 at the Goodwill gets you a nice crock pot to use, and that's
you're not going to want to borrow the
expensive
crock pot that you already have at home.
Yeah, because once you use that crock pot, you're committed to a chain wax crock pot.
Your chili should not be going in there afterwards.
I even just keep the wax in it and let it harden after I'm done. So it's a chain waxing crock pot.
Mine is the same.
And yeah, I have the same thing. Picked up one for $3 because it's super cheap. That's even like an easier entry, or I guess barrier to entry.
Yeah,
is you can go grab one for super cheap. But now that we have an Instapot at work, I have not used my crock pot in, I don't know, 6 months.
Is that 'cause it just melts the wax so much faster? The crock pot takes
5 minutes.
Versus the crock pot takes
hours.
2 hours. I plug it in and
plug it in, set on high, put the lid on, and it's going to take hours before your wax melts. Stovetop, I feel like, was a little quicker for me than doing the crock pot, but then you're dealing with your kitchen pots and pans and a system trying to keep that bag up and taking the bag outside. The crock pot's still better, even though it's more time consuming.
But I mean, to summarize that, it's if you can afford to get a Instapot, it's going to streamline the process, make it so much quicker and just more efficient. And at this point, I'd say if it's something that after you try, you think, I wouldn't get it immediately. Right. I would try this process out, do it the cheap route, maybe try and do it on the stove.
Buy the Silka bag.
Yes.
To start.
And then if you find this is something that you think you can keep up with and you really like the, benefits of it, it's worth it to then get that Instapot for the efficiency.
100%.
So we talked about a little bit about cleaning your chain beforehand and how there's the process of going through with degreaser and going through with mineral spirits and then alcohol. That's like the most involved way almost of cleaning your chain. And I know recently Silka came out with a product that they're calling the chain stripper, which is supposed to be like a one single product that does that whole process. They still say it probably doesn't work as well, but I guess that seems like a really nice option if you have that. And then I know in the office here, we have another tool that we've been using, which is definitely the luxury option. Once you're really committed to chain waxing, do you want to tell them a little bit about that?
We grabbed an ultrasonic cleaner, and we filled that guy with the greaser, dropped the chain in for 5 minutes, and it works wonders.
Yeah.
You could probably almost do it with water. Like the ultrasonic is fantastic.
Well, I think that's what they're mostly used for, is like cleaning jewelry and stuff like that, with just hot water usually.
Right, where you don't want to use chemicals and different things on stuff. Yeah, so the ultrasonic waves agitate everything, loosen up your grime, and all falls off, and that's really, really nice.
That's definitely like the upgrade you might make once you're really committed to chain waxing. Once you're like, this is the way, which I think we are all at now. That ultrasonic cleaner really does clean your chain. It works great when your chain's already dirty too, like after having it on the road. It's
Well,
a good
and
one.
then that's the thing too, is after your chain wears out and you are going to re-wax it, it's actually a lot easier because you're not going to have grease on it. It's just wax.
Yeah,
And
that was
to
one of
get
my big
waxed off-
questions then. So when you're going to like re-wax a chain that's already been waxed, the cleaning process is a lot easier than, say, like the factory grease. when
All
it's
you have to
brand
do
new.
is boil water, put the chain in, and all of the old wax melts right off.
And with it, any dirt, dust that did adhere to the chain, because it's not getting greasy, and that wax maybe holds a little bit of those particles, melt off and wash off with the wax. You get a chain after boiling it that is just as clean as you first cleaned it.
Dang.
Which just makes it that much easier of a process. So it's more involved the first time, but once you get
Right.
your stuff waxed, it's going to be less effort the next time in order to wax it.
And is there also a claim that your chain becomes more efficient with each repeated waxing? Like I thought, because you're repeat waxing, the wax gets into those like nooks and crannies, and really, really like repeated waxing actually gets you a better chain than just the
Silka has
first
a
time.
claim around that. Their claim, though, I think has more to do with their product specifically. So Silka, most of these waxes, there's different types of wax, but Silka uses an additive. I think it's tungsten disulfide. Tungsten disulfide is used in like Indy cars. I think it gets used in engines and Indy cars. And at a microscopic level, it fills in microscopic porousness in the metal, and it permanently hardens. So the idea, the more you wax, the more tungsten disulfide you get into all those microscopic pores, adding to the efficiency, adding to the longevity. Silka claims, and this something I didn't realize, the more efficient your drivetrain is, the more longevity you get. Those are a direct correlation. It's kind of this idea that what makes your chain wear out is those contaminants getting in there, starting to grind down on the plates and allowing it to stretch more easily. If you don't have contaminants getting in, there's less wear on the plates and the chain doesn't stretch. Both of those mean, like we said, thousands of extra miles out of your drivetrain, and simultaneously improved efficiency when you're pedaling. They're related.
And then talking
correlated.
about contaminants getting in, wet weather condition, like riding or for the gravel bike, this is where I feel the chain like excels
Absolutely.
over a standard drip lube.
One thing to mention here is we do live in Northern California, not Portland. We don't live in a place that is constantly raining. We ride in the rain. We ride in wet conditions, like you said, gravel. We have creek crossings. Like we ride in the wet. But we aren't in a place that's wet all the time. So just take that as you will, as a little preface to this.
But we had a few events this year, and one of them was, so this is not even a case for bad weather necessarily. We did BWR on a tandem, and Jack and Ryan were our support crew following us around in the vehicle. And do you want to talk a little bit about that, Jack?
Yeah, first, just shout out to you guys again for doing that whole course on a tandem.
So
It took, what,
brutal.
9
So
hours?
brutal.
9 hours.
That's...
If you don't know,
just
go look
bravo,
up the
bravo.
Belgian Waffle Ride San Diego. You'll see it's an unroad event. It was about 135, 140 miles,
Like
100 miles of
12K.
asphalt,
Yeah.
40 miles of dirt, lots of single track, lots of double track, lots of fire roads. You guys were underbiking, and you did it on a tandem.
Yeah, it's definitely one of those
And
like
sorry to
once
cut you
in,
off, but you won the tandem category.
Yeah,
yeah,
you did win
true.
the tandem category.
it was. I would say it was a once in a lifetime experience. Meaning like we did it once and we're never going to do it again.
You wouldn't recommend it to
No
everyone?
intended
No.
to do again.
Yeah.
But yeah, but Ryan and I were kind of bouncing around in the car, not so much supporting you guys, but just kind of taking it all in, getting stuff on video. And